when you look at the world, you don't have to look at country by country. You have to look at the world as one market, as one employment market. That's where the future is going.
Hello, I'm Mark Jackson, and I'm the host of The New HR. We're very pleased to have a very special guest today, Tony Jamous from Oyster HR. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
I know your time is at a premium, as anyone would understand, taking a look at your LinkedIn profile, which is very interesting. So let's just jump right into it. Can you share a few things about your background and what's brought you to where you are today?
I was born in Lebanon, moved to France when I was a teenager, studied computer science, and I became a technology entrepreneur 13 years ago. I started my first technology company in the API business that I took public in mid-2016 by merging with Vonage, was public on the New York Stock Exchange. And then the company was acquired by Ericsson a few years later for $6.5 billion. So I left the business, took some time off, and decided I want to start a new business. I was in my mid-late 30s. But I wanted to build a business that was mission-driven, that aligns with how I see the world. And that led me to start Oyster. Oyster is a global employment platform that enables any company in the world hire anyone in any country, without the need of setting up entities, hiring lawyers, accountant, payroll provider. And Oyster's mission is to make the world more equal and free by democratizing access to global job opportunities. And I started this company in January 2020.
Wow. Interesting time to start a new company, that's for sure. Who would you say is getting the most value out of the platform?
Look, it's great for business, for our customers, because suddenly the world is their oyster when they're looking for talent. They can find amazing, diverse talents that in many instances is actually more cost effective than hiring in expensive tier 1 cities in the world.
Yeah.
But it's great for people as well, because suddenly these people have access to opportunities that they would have not accessed before. 73% of the team members on our platform record a salary increase through the Oyster platform.
Oh, really?
And they can have freedom and flexibility. They can live where they want to live. They can stay back in their home countries if they desire to, while have access to these amazing job opportunities. So I would say both businesses and people benefit from this model.
So as CEO, you wear many, many hats. What's one surprising aspect of your daily routine that listeners might not expect?
Yeah, like what I spend energy do a lot is to get my team to get used to a culture where there's a high degree of psychological safety. Because when people come to work with us,
yes,
experienced people specifically, they are traumatized by their past work experiences. So they need to go through an adjustment phase to realize that nobody here is going to eat them alive, and to relax and start emerging as their true self. So yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. And since I started this company, one of my goals was to create highly safe environment for people, and it's working amazing. We have great engagement. People feel belonging here. We are extremely diverse around the world. But yet, when I hire some of these very experienced and talented executives, they need to adjust to this new environment where they don't have to they don't have to wear a shield all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The next question I was going to ask on culture, so it kind of ties into that in terms of your leadership style. How do you foster not only longer term collaboration, but making the new people you're bringing on board? How do you foster a safe feeling for them, like you had just mentioned?
Yeah. So my behavior is first to always assume best intent from other people, and secondly, I thrive not to be reactive to bad news. I encourage people to make small mistakes and learn from them, and I default to absolute transparency as much as possible.
Interesting. Early experiences obviously, often shape our approach to our leadership and our leadership style. Can you tell us your first foray into building a substantial team and any valuable lessons you learned from it?
In a previous company, we built a team. We were 500 people. When we exited, it was the main learning I got many learnings. One of them is I can be more successful by burning myself less and by burning other people less. That's number one. Number two is the best product doesn't always win. It's the best marketed product that is positioned well for the customer needs and the customer segment that is usually the winner. And three is be much more diligent in forming a team that is fit for purpose and diverse. So in the first person I worked with when I started this company was an executive search consultant who helped me design my team and hire my team in a very deliberate way. And today we have the best team in our category.
That's great. HR landscape obviously is evolving. I don't need to tell you that. Starting in January 2020, you probably saw the most amount of evolution ever. What's your long-term vision for Oyster?
Look, we want the future to look like you can hire people no matter where they are, right? So today you want to hire somebody in a country, you're kind of concerned about, okay, what is going to be the HR laws and the regulation of employing somebody in the country? How much should I pay them? What benefit I should offer them? How can I retain them in the long term? So we want these questions to go away, and you would hire somebody from the Oyster workforce, let's call it, as a plug and play into your organization. So you would be hiring, let's say you would hiring in the US, you would have an office, in London, and then everybody else would be on the Oyster workforce, no matter what they are. So you don't have to worry about which country they are in, because what we've done is we build the employment infrastructure in 180 countries. We build a software platform on top that makes global hiring as easy as local hiring is few clicks, essentially creating an abstraction layer for you. When you look at the world, you don't have to look at country by country. You have to look at the world as one market, of one employment market. That's where the future is going.
No, I agree for sure. It's always FTEs, or do you do fractional employees or contracts, or what's the environment?
Yeah, we support all the possible employment modalities. So contractor is one, FTE is one, FTE on our own infrastructure, so we would be the employer of record, or FTE on your own entity if you have that. So we cover all the possible employment modalities that you would want to employ through.
So it's obviously, creating a seamless geographic, creating the world as one market is a very bold mission. Can you share any specific strategies that Oyster uses to connect companies with global talent?
Yeah, so we have a talent network today that help our customer find that talent in any country. But typically the customer come to us, they already found the talent, right? And our job starts is when they found Mary in Athens, they want to hire her, and they just don't want to spend months and hire lawyers and accountant and payroll provider and benefit provider. They go to our website, to our platform, they generate an employment contract that is compliant and that is fair for Mary. They simulate her costs, the total cost of employment, and they know what is fair pay look like for that role in Greece. They know what benefits she deserves to have, and they kind of provision them on the platform. And a few days later, she is employed and ready to start working for them.
So I think you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I just wanted to ask again, so how many countries are you in? Do you have talent in?
180 countries.
180 countries. Wow. Okay. So no lack of options and choices, that's for sure. Remote work, I was going to say, continues to be a growing trend, but that might go depending on month to month is up and down. But as an organization, you thrive on it. Can you share a success story of a remote team member kind of exemplifies the benefits and efficiency of work style? You don't take off the hat. The hat's awesome.
Okay, it's getting warm here in Cyprus. Essentially, let me give you the story of Christina. She's one of our employees in Manila.
Okay.
She used to commute 3 hours to go to work every day.
Wow.
She's a mother of 2. Now she can work from home. She can take her children to school, pick them up, spend some time with them without feeling guilty. That's one example. I can give you tons more example. I mean, let me tell you about my example. I mean, I was able to leave city living. I lived in London and in cities in the US for the last 20 years, to move to a Mediterranean island called Cyprus. And I live 50 meters from the beach. And I'm in great weather, connected with nature, and I can be extremely productive because my team is everywhere, and we default to a synchronous way of communication and collaboration that works well across time zones. And when I'm doing a meeting, it's already prepared. I've already checked it out in advance. So these are some of the most productive meetings I've ever had.
That's good to hear. I was on your website, and it mentions, obviously several success stories. Do you see specific industries or company sizes that benefit the most from Oyster solution, or is it very broad?
Well, we focus on the SMB and mid-market up to 5,000 employees, but this model can work for anybody, even Fortune 500 companies. In the past, I used to hire PwC and Accenture to go implement for them a global employment infrastructure. Essentially, they were rebuilding an Oyster within their company, which I did in my previous business. We had to spend millions of dollars building our own employment infrastructure, but then failed to deliver on a scalable HR compliance, and we failed to deliver on a great employee experience. So even large companies, we have large companies coming to us saying, hey, we have 80 entities around the world to employ people. We're making a loss there. We have to hire an HR VP in every one of them. We have to have all these infrastructure. Why don't you, we want to outsource this to you. So we're seeing that trend. We're seeing that the big companies the enterprises are rethinking their global employment strategy.
You've experienced, impressive growth over a challenging time. Can you share the current team size and composition, and how you foster a strong culture despite being so geographically diverse?
Yep, sure. So we are 500 people today, distributed in 65 countries, from over 100 nationalities, and gender equal across the board in overall, on my leadership team, and also on my board. Very intentional way of building the business. And how do you create a strong culture? First is about building trust. You have to have a foundation in your business of building trust, because as we don't see people coming to the office, in the past we used to default to when we see the person in seat, we would believe that they were productive.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore. And that's actually inherited from the Industrial Revolution. Even in the office, it doesn't mean if you're in seat, you're productive. So you have to default to building a trust within the organization as a foundation. And secondly, you have to be clear about how you work together. You have to be intentional of the way you operate. So in Oyster, we call it the Oyster Operating System. It's a series of tools and rules that guide people to know, well, when do you want to use Notion? When do you want to use Asana? When do you want to use Zoom or recorded Loom video? How do you do meetings, for instance? And how do you take care of yourself as well? Like we also go beyond to help people ensure that the tax that comes with remote work, such as being always connected, we don't want you to be always connected, or feel isolated. How do you manage that? So we train people on our Oyster operating model when they start through the onboarding process. And that becomes a part of the culture. How you work together becomes part of the culture. And lastly is about being clear about what success looks like on an individual level, on a team level, and on a company level. Because again, when you wake up in the morning in Manila and you need to know what is expected from you, what success look like, even though your team could be in another time zone. So yeah, building trust, being intentional about how you work, and being clear about success look like.
Those are all good recommendations. We're actually considering, like, we have some employees globally work a variety of different ways. What's your perspective? Because you see so much in terms of quality of employees. You had mentioned your asynchronous communications, and I know you produced a guide on LinkedIn as well. And you specifically mentioned Manila. I know that there's whole cities in the Philippines that operate on, North American time or European time. What's your experience in terms of the best from a productivity perspective? Is it they're working while we're sleeping and vice versa, or we're all working at the same time? What's the best?
So it depends on the level of the person we have in the company. So if their job requires them to have more standardized work, then defaulting to async is the best way possible, and giving them massive amount of freedom and flexibility when they need to work, and not measure them on how much time they put in, but measure them on the outputs that they deliver. Mm-hmm. As you go up in the hierarchy and as your job becomes more ambiguous and complicated, it's you want to intensify increasingly the live synchronous time. But you need to do it intentionally to be productive. You need to make sure that it's prepared in advance, or if you're doing a workshop, to design the workshop to make sure that people are engaged and productive. So depending on the task and depending on the level of the company, you want to adapt your approach to maximize essentially the freedom of people and the flexibility while optimizing the output.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to necessarily be a one-size-fits-all, but what I found really interesting about your answer is the fact that it actually, there's a bigger variation in terms of the seniority. That was surprising to me.
Yeah, and actually, I'm not surprised that CEOs are increasingly asking their people to come back to the office, because the CEO job is the most complicated role in the company. So they're dealing with challenges day in, day out. It's very different to do a CEO job than to do, let's say, a business development representative job, where your job is to email people or call people in a repetitive way.
Well, they should force the C-suite back to the office, and all the other workers that they're using the stick and carrot approach with, leave them alone, because it's significantly improving the quality of their life. I can't believe that story. 3 hours in savings of community. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, her children will be thanking us.
Yeah, no, definitely. So can you share any exciting innovations that you foresee in the HR tech landscape, and how are you and your team preparing to stay ahead of the curve?
Well, today it's impossible not to talk about artificial intelligence when it comes to innovation.
Yeah,
we have gathered tons of employment, compliance, HR data in 180 countries. We have a unique set of data across the employment lifecycle, and we are increasingly using AI to bring it to the world and make sure that companies are equipped more and more with tools that enable them to adopt a global employment strategy from day one.
Interesting.
And that tools, this data used to only be available for Fortune 500 company in the US and Europe, right?
Right.
You have companies like Mercer that are specialized in providing this type of compliance and HR data, but they are concentrated in North America and Europe, while the world now is global. And also now you have AI, which is going to change the game for how you consume knowledge.
How do you see it changing the game for remote employees, or I guess for all employees? What are your thoughts on it?
It's going to make it easier and easier for companies to employ people in other countries. Again, we want to get to that vision that we spoke about at the beginning of this podcast, where you You can hire people where you have offices, and then for the rest, you can use Oyster. You don't have to know in which country the team member is.
Yes, absolutely.
So I mean, by the way, Mark, I mean the concept of country is outdated. I mean, we invented this concept of country. We created these borders, this regulation. I mean, my previous business, it was an API on top of a very fragmented telecom network in 180 countries. We built a multi-billion-dollar business just by reducing the complexity that the concept of country has created. And this is yet another example of how there is opportunity in complexity and unnecessary complexity, because it doesn't have to be that complicated. So with Oyster, think about Oyster as one country. And beneath it, you can hire anywhere in 180 countries.
Yes.
It's an abstraction layer.
True. So I really want to be conscious of your time. I know you have a hard stop. So is there anything else that you wanted to share that we really haven't covered in terms of anything? API, plugins, something coming down, special passion project? I'm sure you have lots going on.
Well, I have to say, we need to acknowledge the power of remote work, global employment in impacting emerging economies. There are 80 million jobs going unfulfilled in the West. According to BCG, that's 8.5 trillion economical loss, around 10% of the world economy. While at the same time, you have over 1 billion knowledge workers coming into the workforce in the next 10 years from emerging economies. And today, brain drain is the number one reason why emerging economies remain emerging. They lose their best talent to the West, and they send merely back 5% in terms of remittance.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, if you employ somebody in that country in an emerging economy and pay them a fair salary, they will stay back home and they will access this amazing job opportunity without leaving the community and bringing 100% of their income back home. So that's why remote work is a necessary condition for economical growth.
That's an interesting perspective in how to look at the growth for emerging countries. But like you said, there's no countries anymore. We're all one.
Exactly.
Under the
Oyster.
Oyster platform. Absolutely. So where can, we'll include some links in the show notes, but can you just share where people can learn a little bit more about you and how they can get in touch?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and also you can venture on the Oyster website. It's oysterhr.com.
Okay. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you for having me.